mainly, how do we make our current or a new generation or the younger generation very strong Hindus in this country, because it has become more and more important to represent ourselves as a Hindu community.
Right.
So if you have any advice on that for the current generation.
How to honor the Hindu tradition more. It's interesting because, I've been working with these traditions in India for the last 40 years. And so I've seen what's happened in India. There has been a great revival going on. And you finally have a prime minister who will openly be a proud Hindu. Before they were Hindus, but they didn't want, it had to be something they kind of did in private. And then they go to a mosque to prove they're secular, or they, so this is, you have to understand what this tradition is. And we can make it in a few simple points. Hinduism is the world's oldest religion and spiritual path. It is the most diverse. I often tell people there are more religions inside of Hinduism than out. We recognize one reality, but we have more deities than everybody else. We have more temples, more sampradayas, more gurus, more sadhanas, and we emphasize individual spiritual experience, not mass belief. What is a sadhana? It's your individual spiritual path. The deity, Ishta Devata, you choose the one that you're connected to. It's not one guy for everybody or else, And our tradition is of self-realization, knowing yourself. But as I say, we honor the self. It's not a tradition of one thing as opposed to another, one identity as opposed to another. Self-realization is the goal. Understanding the universe as conscious, not just simply something on the outside to be manipulated. The universe is a single person. We are different functions of that single person. And so many gurus, teachers, show me any other tradition in the last 200 years that has a comparable figures to Vivekananda, Ramakrishna, Dayananda, Aurobindo, Ramana Maharshi, Tagore, Mahatma Gandhi, Anandamayi Maha, Shivananda, Chinmayananda, the great Shankaracharyas of Kanchi, Sringeri, the Paramacharya of Kanchi. I met him several times. There was also the Acharya of Sringeri before he was also had the same name, Chandrasekhar. His works were also extraordinary. You have the Swami Brahmananda of the Jyotirma. So look at all of those figures. Yogananda, who came and stayed in America, manifestations of the teachings. The children have to be taught. The problem is the textbooks are not teaching what Hindu Dharma is, and they don't teach Vedanta. And for example, I found so many textbooks talk about Manusmriti. Manusmriti is an ancient law book of over 2,000 years ago. And I tell people, well, why don't you teach Christianity by the book of Leviticus in the Bible? Even Islam has a Sharia, which is enforced. You can teach them that. But Manusmriti is not something that is part of the Hindu thought. Why don't you teach them the Gita? Why don't you teach them the Upanishads? And now you have so many Hindu temples in America, and yet in classes on religion, they don't take them to the temple. They give some quote from some old book. I don't want to go through my debates with academia. We have a lot of things there. But in Hindu studies, you rarely find a practicing Hindu there. In Islamic studies and Christian studies, you will have Christians and Muslims there. Unfortunately, and this is I want to go into the India side. I also write about those things. But what happened in India, we had the independence movement with all these great gurus. But the people who took power after independence through Prime Minister Nehru were socialist communists, and they wrote the textbooks of India with a soft spot for socialism and communism and a dislike of Hinduism. That is why you have these distortions where Hindu children are taught who all the different Mughal rulers were. They don't know who Ramakrishna was. They don't know who, even you go back, they don't know all these great teachers that have been there. They don't know the Mauryas, the Guptas, whatever it is. So these things have been there. And in the West, this is a point I like to raise too. When I was a kid, we were taught that the Native Americans were savages who massacred wagon trains. Now we've learned to at least honor their traditions to some degree. And throughout the world, there's been a revision of appreciating Native and indigenous traditions from the old colonial distortions to recognizing their value. But we still see that the same colonial views about Hinduism exist: caste, cows, curry, whatever it is, sati, these things. They don't talk about yoga Vedanta. They don't even recognize that yoga is Hindu. And where does it come from? Patanjali is a Smriti tradition inside that. So there needs to be a new education going on. And you need to teach the children what these traditions are. And we have very good teachers, Swami Dayananda, Arsha Vidya, they put a very good set of books for children, Chinmayananda, all these. Swami Narayan is very good at teaching their children. I've been to so many of their temples. For the children come in, they have 2,000 kids there. And they're involved in seva, they're involved in all these things. So the Hindu community has to be more proactive, but a Hindu voice has to be raised. In America, please note the Hindu American Foundation. Sometimes people say Hindus should not be political, as if it's bad. Every other group is political. I'll give you an example. If you study lobbyists at a political level relating to different religions, all over the world, you have thousands of Muslim lobbyists, Jewish lobbyists, Christian lobbyists. There's only one Hindu lobbyist organization, the Hindu American Foundation. And yet you're told you shouldn't be political. Politics is part of the currency of where we live. Politics determines laws. If you don't vote, who is going to support you? You can be the best community in terms of paying taxes, not going to jail, respecting laws. But if you don't vote, and if you don't vote on your issues, you won't be acknowledged. Recently, there was a campaign half did for remembering 50 years of the Bangladesh war, in which up to 3 million people, predominantly Hindus, were massacred. It's almost been removed from the textbooks. It's not given any attention, but raising that issue, they were able to get various organizations to do that. You have to recognize, if you're living in this world, Hindu Dharma has to be as political, as economic, as educational based, as media based as anyone else. And that is just part of surviving in the world in which you live. You honor, you respect, but the Hindu view needs to be there. Instead of having somebody who was an anti-Hindu saying why Hindus do this and why Hindus do that. And if we put the Hindu Dharma in an understandable modern language like the Yoga Vedanta movements have done, people take it up all over the world. And that is what we see. But here's another interesting point that I've noted, that some people say, oh, don't worry about it, we'll take care of itself. Most of the countries of the world, Hinduism is not a legal religion, not even in Russia. I'm not even certain about France. UK it is, and all these countries where Hindus stay, but all the other religions are legal. So it's very important you have legal status, you have political status, you have economic status. That is the world in which you live. And India, you can recognize, America is recognized as a Christian country predominantly. India is predominantly Christian. Now let me tell you, even Iran, all these Islamic countries, there's so many Islamic countries. If you can recognize that a country can be Islamic, you can have an Islamic state, you can have all these things. Why is it dangerous or wrong for Hindus to say India is a Hindu majority, or the Indian civilization, which is one of the great civilizations of the world, is historically predominantly Hindu? And what do people honor in India? They go to India for yoga, for meditation, for mantra, for rituals. You know, it's very sad. Going into Kerala, outside an Ayurvedic school, they were putting up, guess what? This is what they put up around the universities, pictures of Che Guevara. Not Shankara, not Guru Narayan, not their own teachers. They're brainwashing them and they think it's cool to wear a Che Guevara shirt, not to have Shiva, all of that. So it's important to recognize there is a culture, a heritage. I don't want to go into the rest of what I do, but just very briefly. We're also honoring India as a culture and as a civilization. And in that regard, India has preserved its civilization. China hasn't. China's Marxist. The Islamic world, there were pre-Islamic traditions. The Christian world, there were pre-Christian traditions. The Native American, native traditions are surviving, but barely. We have friends here. They live an hour outside, less than an hour outside of Albuquerque, in a small Native American community. There are 19 different missionary activities operating in their community, often targeting their children. That is the reality of the world in which you live. So Hindus have to have their point of view. They have to express it, even assert it if it's not being heard, with respect, with regard, with knowledge of diversity, but not with being apologetic. India as a civilization needs to be preserved. You have all these festivals. Other countries used to have them, they don't anymore. You are preserving a great spiritual heritage of humanity. I went to Bali recently. Hinduism was there. You go to other parts of the world, same types of traditions were there. So it's important that you preserve these and universalize them, honor them, and understand their greater